Hey folks, welcome to Rustin's Boneyard. Today for But What Do We Feed the Kids? We are going to make a simple Italian style meat ragu sauce, Bolognese. First thing to do, chop an onion. So, when we chop our onion, we're going to go with our big knife straight down through the root into two halves. Take the tips off and then peel back and off the outer layer. So, chopping onions, we want a fine dice for this. So the way we do a fine dice, again, big knife, fingers on top of the onion, go sideways through. Not all the way through, just to the root. 1, 2, 3 if it's a big onion. I'm going to come back this side and we're going to do a fan over here. Again, not all the way through, leave the root intact. Go around like this and then 3 fingers in a line, 1 in front, 2 behind, and we're just going to go down through our onion like this. When you get to this end bit, put it down on its edge and then we can just go finally across and just trim around the root. Chuck the root, that's good. What have we got here? We've got some garlic. Knife on top of the garlic, palm on top of the knife, crush. Dry end, snick it off. What's going to happen now is that the skin is just going to fall away for us. Halve it. If there's a significant root in here, this piece, there's not much of it, just take that out because that can be a little acrid. So that goes. We can just stack these two on top of each other and just go through, again, fingers in a line, keep them well out of the way of the cutting edge of the knife and just go up and down through here. Let's get that going in our pan. Olive oil. So I've got some nice heat into this olive oil now. I can smell the olive oil cooking and just take my onion in. We don't want this to get too hot. We're not looking to brown this onion up a lot. What we want to do is just soften it, cook it through. There's a piece there which is not quite, oh yes it is. Sea salt, be generous. Dried oregano in. I've got some thyme here and some fresh rosemary. We want to chop this quite finely, rosemary, because otherwise what happens is you get big, obvious pieces of it, and kids don't like visible pieces of stuff. Quite finely chop that rosemary. Can go in. I'm just pulling some of these bits of thyme off the thicker stalks. If they're very thin thyme stalks, they're fine, they can just be chopped and they can just go in. But these slightly bigger ones, they don't really break down and they're kind of woody. And we're nicely softened, but we're not putting a lot of colour on it at this point. Red wine vinegar. A little dash of red wine. Don't open a bottle of red wine or buy a bottle of red wine if you don't need to use it. There's no need. It's just a nice thing. It's a nice thing to put in it, but you don't have to. Now what we're going to do, put a little slug of that in. Just going to add some depth of flavour. And we just want to cook that alcohol out. If we're still smelling alcohol off it, then we haven't quite cooked all the alcohol out. It should start to have a sort of fruity aroma rather than a boozy one. It's not going to taste like wine. It's just what it does. It just adds a kind of depth to it. And as I say, you really do not have to put it in. If you've got a bottle of white wine that's half empty, you know, and you want to put a bit of that in because you don't want to buy red or you don't want to open a red, yeah, do that. Just put a bit of that in, or don't put anything in, whatever you want, you know. Don't feel too bound by this. So what I'm starting to see now is that I can start to see fat cooking on the surface of the pan. You see the oil, not the wine. So that's telling me that I've cooked the wine off sufficiently now. And what I'm going to put in here is a little tomato concentrate, a couple of tablespoons or so. I'm just going to stir that around a little bit. And this basically now, I'm just cooking that off slightly. That's going to release a few oils of its own. What we've got is this kind of quite intense, flavoursome base for this sauce now. You can see some of these oils starting to come out. So I'm going to transfer that into my pan here, my saucepan. That's hot. Pan back on the heat. Swipe this out because this tomato, it's sugary. If there's any left on here like this, it's sugary, and when I apply high heat, it's going to burn. And I am going to apply high heat because we're going to cook off our meat, and I'm going to start by putting in some beef tallow. You can use olive oil again, you can use duck fat, you can use lard, you know, don't use vegetable oil please, whatever you do. This is some beautiful mince from Tom Joseph Butchery. And what Tom does with this particular mince is he mixes 50% beef chuck with organ meats. So this is kidney and liver and heart through this. And what is so great about that is the nutrition content is through the roof. This is stuff that I can't, you know, I'm not going to get my daughter to eat liver. She actually will eat heart because it's more of a muscle meat. But she's not going to eat liver, and she's not going to eat kidney, and I can't say I would have done when I was her age. So this is a way to increase the nutrition that she's getting. You certainly don't have to do this. You can just use ordinary chuck mince, no problem. You can use bits of short rib mince, bits of shin, bits of fatty offcuts. You want plenty of fat. That's the main thing. And if you are using some of these organ meats that are very lean, I mean like heart, you can make an amazing ragu out of heart. And it's so cheap. It's just you know, it's a few quid for a full-size heart. But it is lean, and you do, you know, maybe there need to add a little bit of extra fat. Now what I'm doing is, as you can see, I'm just kind of pressing this down into here. I'm going to season this again with sea salt across the top here. That can all just go in. And I'm just going to mix this around. I'm going to get a little bit more heat on it. And we're just looking to get a little bit of colour onto this meat. Nothing too drastic. Just turn it over like this. Getting it again to turn back into a more of a sort of what looks like sort of clear fatty liquid rather than, you know, murky watery stuff which isn't quite evaporated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put back on my heat my pot, and I'm going to sweep all this in. Again, I'm going to use my silicone spatula, stir that meat lovely and rich. And what we want to do now is we want to add some simple tomatoes. I'm going to use tinned in. Reduce the heat. Now these tomatoes, sometimes they have little bits of skin still on. You don't want tomato skins in this. Here we go. On the end of this one, there's some skin. Just peel it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my wooden spoon and lift these tomatoes up one by one, and I'm just going to use my big knife just to chop through them, pierce them. They're going to break down nicely, but we don't want massive chunks of tomato, particularly not if there's a kind of end rooty, stemmy bit. There's another bit of skin there. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm just going to cut that off. Now, when you're cutting through, sometimes you find a really tough tomato, which I have just there. What I'm going to do is put that just on the board, just chop that whole tough end off. I just don't really need that or want it. Okay, put a lid on it and just let it cook away. Just let it go on hob, low heat. What we're looking for is the sign that all the water has cooked out of this, that it's all broken down and the oils have come to the surface and they're starting to come out, and that's when it's so delicious. I'm going to put the lid on this, I'm going to put it on the hob. Here we go. Let's have a look at it in a bit. It's been on for 2 to 3 hours, and what we're looking for is what I like to call when a sauce gives up its secrets. Now if you look at that, you can see that on the surface there's this coating of red oil. There's no water here. We can see little dimples in the surface. There's one right here. There's no pooled kind of murky liquid. It's all just oily and tacky. Now as we stir this through, we can see that just at the bottom it's just starting to colour up, and we need to be really careful that we don't let that burn. Tomatoes and onions and stuff, they have sugars in, and those sugars will burn if they're allowed to get too hot. Now that little bit of caramelization on the bottom, you have to watch for that as it starts to really become ready, this sauce. But it has an incredible flavour just as it starts to go. So keep an eye on it. You don't want it all stuck to the bottom. Now look, don't worry. If you slightly overdo it and you put your spoon in and you're like, oh God, there's a whole crusted, burnt bit on the bottom of my pan, don't worry. Just lift off everything on the top, pour the sauce off, and then just scrub the pan. It's fine. In terms of what do we feed the kids, what are we going to serve this with? And obviously you can just give them ordinary pasta if you like, but let's say you're trying to avoid that. Get some courgette or zucchini. You can either use a vegetable peeler to put that into strips, or you can use a spiralizer to create little spirals. You can do that with carrot, with courgette, and just flash it in a pan, heat it through, put the sauce on top. One thing I'm gonna do for my daughter tonight, I'm gonna do this in a mozzarella wrap. So I'm gonna get some fresh mozzarella and I'm gonna cook that down in a pan until it forms a crust underneath, and then I'm gonna put some sauce in. I'm gonna roll it up, so she's gonna have basically like a little roll of mozzarella cheese with the sauce inside. It's a really good thing to do. But you can see the color of this. If you could smell it, it's so intense and deep and rich. It's got all those vitamins. Give it a go. Ruston's Boneyard pasta sauce.